Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Before we get started, today I have two announcements about exciting things going on with Transform Via Travel. The first is the launch of our first group trip. I've partnered up with Kelly McDermott from A Path Less Taken, and we're planning an amazing trip to New Zealand in January 2019. For more information, go to bit.ly, bit.ly link, /WENZ 2019. It's all lowercase letters, WENZ 2019. And follow us on Facebook at Transform Via Travel for more information about an upcoming question and answer webinar. Also, I've just launched an online program called Get Ready, Get Set, Go Solo, designed to help the first-time solo traveler get unburied from all the research and actually start traveling. For more information about the online program, go to bit.ly /ReadySetSolo. That's bit.ly /ReadySetSolo. And that information will also be included in our show notes. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. Time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with Esther Jacobs as she shares about how she learned to trust her intuition while traveling. Joining us live today from Amsterdam is Esther Jacobs. Welcome, Esther.
Hi.
Great to have you here. And I know you have enormous volume of stories to share with us. And I like to have my guests decide where they want to start with the story. So I'd love to hear, how did you get started with solo travel?
Well, I don't even remember because I've been traveling for as long as I can remember. I've visited over 100 countries. And most of them I did by myself, not so much because I wanted to travel by myself, but because that was the most practical thing, or nobody wanted to join me or could join me, and I never let it limit me. And in fact, I found out that solo travel is like a gateway to many, many adventures, to getting to know yourself. It's a metaphor for a lot of other things like business and other things in life. So I've been traveling solo for as long as I know, and I just love it. The flexibility and, the possibilities. You can meet people if you want to, and you can be alone if you want to. So for me, there's almost nothing else.
That's fantastic. I think in that one introductory comment, you've summarized all the reasons why solo travel is so important to me and relevant, and why we do this podcast. So we're off to a great start. I liked how you called it the gateway to this adventure, but the adventure was so much more than just the travel parts. That idea of self-discovery and confidence and things like that. Do you have any examples of, times in your travels where you have been tested by the trip or other situations happening in the trip and how you overcame them?
Oh, yes, many. And I think for many people, the first thing that they struggle with is, going to dinner by yourself, going to a restaurant. But nowadays it's very easy because you bring your phone and you start browsing Facebook or sending WhatsApp messages or pictures to your friends. But before, you would either have a Lonely Planet that you would be, leafing through, or you would have a notebook where you would write actual travel notes. And by doing that, you would also signal to other travelers that you were traveling by yourself. And they would say, hey, do you mind if I join you? And you have nice conversations at the dinner table. And for me, one of the major turning points, in fact, was that I had been traveling by myself a lot. And everybody asked me, does it ever happen that something bad happens, or you get robbed, or you get in a difficult situation as a woman by yourself? But I never had those moments. And I thought, is it just luck that I have, or is it my intuition, or is it experience? And I decided when I was 26 to test this. So I was going to travel the Caribbean for a month, and I was going to only listen to my intuition. If my intuition told me go there, I would go. If it told me get out of the bus, I would get out of the bus. And I would test if, in all these weird situations, nothing would happen to me. So I decided to take it to an extreme, and it was quite an interesting journey, I must say.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Tell us a little more about what did your intuition tell you to do and how did it guide you? Because you're actually practicing the idea of trusting your intuition, which many of us, in fact, practice shutting it down in a way. And so how did you let that flourish?
Well, it's weird because your intuition is this like inner voice. You have to learn to distinguish it from your ratio and from, your fear and from your worries. And they all sound the same at the beginning. So I had no idea if I was really listening to my intuition or if I was listening to my rationale telling me like it was intuition. But I decided to just trust my gut feeling. So I booked a round ticket in the Caribbean, stopping at different islands. And one of the islands I was going was Haiti. And Haiti is the poorest country on the Western Hemisphere. There was no reason to go there, really. There were boycotts, there was no tourism, but I had a possibility to go there, so I did. So I arrived at the airport. There's no tourists, there's no white people, there's no backpackers, there's nothing. And I was just watching all these people, and I went to the taxis and I asked them, how much is a ride into the city? And they said like $50. And I thought that was too much money. And I said, are there any hostels or cheap hotels? And they started laughing. They said, there's no hostels, there's no hotels, there's no tourists. And they said, do you still want the ride to the city? I'm like, no, I'm going to wait. And I told myself, I'm going to wait? What am I waiting for? What am I doing here? And as I was standing there, after 15 minutes, one of the taxi drivers came back to me and he said, hey, you still want to ride to the city? Maybe I have a solution for you because I'm here to pick up some journalists from Associated Press. And I can ask them if you can join us on the ride. So I was like, hey, you see, a solution presents itself. So I waited with the taxi driver and he said, let's go to the baggage belt to, introduce you to the journalists. So we get to the baggage belt and there's these fly cases with cameras and microphones and everything is broken. So there's two swearing journalists trying to save whatever they could. So not a good moment to introduce myself. I just follow them into the taxi and, the taxi driver gestures me to just sit down in the van. So I sit down and halfway on our way to the city, the two journalists look at me and they say, who are you? And I'm like, hi, I'm Esther. And they're like, what are you doing here? I have no idea. Where are you going? I have no idea. And they look at each other and they say, oh, well, one of our colleagues is arriving in a few days, so maybe you can have his suite in the hotel until he gets there. I'm like, that would be great. So they take me to the most luxurious hotel. They give me a suite and they start unpacking their broken stuff. And there's one case that they cannot open. So those two grown strong men are pulling and pushing. They can't open it. And I walk past and I look at the case and I see a strip of sellotape. I take off the sellotape and suddenly the case opens and they look at me and they say, who are you? And they say, what are you doing tomorrow? And I say, I have no idea. And they say, we're going to interview President Aristide. Do you want to come? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? So we're in the van going to Aristide's palace and there's a lot of CIA protection because President Clinton was going to visit the week after. I had no idea of all of this because I didn't read up on history. I just went to Haiti.
I like that you were very spontaneous and, it doesn't always require all that preparation and research. So please continue.
Yeah, true. It may sound stupid and blunt, but it's just being open to opportunity and recognizing opportunity and being, open to whatever happens. And also, I always try to help to make it a win-win situation and not just being like a parasite or only taking and not giving. So in this case, the journalist and I, we get to the palace and there's a CIA security guard and he says, we need your press papers. And of course, I didn't have any press pass or papers and I wasn't on the guest list. But the journalist said, she's with us and, we can't let her in, whatever. And then they found out, they got a call that another hotel had canceled the hotel rooms that were reserved for their colleagues. So they said, oh shit, we have to do this interview and we need to arrange those hotel rooms and we can't do both at the same time. So I said, why don't you send me with the driver to the hotel? I'll make sure the hotel rooms get reserved and then I'll come back to the palace to join you. And they said, but the CIA will never let you in. And I said, when that happens, I'll just help you with the hotel rooms. So I go with the driver to the other hotel and I told the manager, I'm just going to sit here in the lobby until you make the reservation again for the rooms that journalists had reserved. So he looks at me sitting there and he's like, she's not going anywhere. And he rebooks the hotel rooms. So with that confirmation, I went back to the palace. And of course, the security guy said, sorry, I can't let you in. I said, but my colleagues are already inside. So, I would like to go in. And he said, well, if I let you through, the next security guard won't let you in. And I said, why don't you let me try? And he says, okay, but I'm sure they will send you back. So he let me through the first security check. And of course, I get to the second check and the guy says, I can't let you in. You're not on the guest list. I'm like, listen, the first guy let me through. So you know that it's okay. And he let me through as well. So I got through 7 security checks. The last one, a metal detector. And I had this big fruit knife in my backpack. But they let me through. And I arrived in Aristide's office, where the 2 journalists are interviewing him, and they look at me like, who are you? What is happening here? How did you get into the palace? And it was so funny. And that night there was a big voodoo party in a hotel where all the journalists and CIA guys and security or whatever, they were all there. Everybody was talking about this blonde girl who got through security. And these CIA people, they surround me and they say, oh, the Haitian security people, they see a blonde girl and they let you through and we apologize. And I'm like, but you let me through and you and you and you. It was very funny. And by that time, I had been in the palace interviewing the president. And later they took me to the other side of the island to see the boats where all the refugees go to Miami. And my trip to Haiti was it was out of this world just by following my intuition and getting into unlikely situations and meeting people and being open and trying to help. And it was really one of the most electrifying experiences ever.
Well, and you never could have planned something like that. Never in a million years. How to hoodwink the CIA.
And it gets even better because when these things start happening, you get a kind of energy surrounding you that people can tell that you're on fire or you're very alert and aware. I didn't realize it, but when I got into the plane to my next destination, and I think it was Cuba or something, the plane stopped from Miami to Haiti. I got in as the only person coming into the plane in Haiti. The plane was half empty. The plane takes off and the guy sitting opposite of me in the aisle says, what did you do in Haiti? You're the only person that gets into the plane. And I'm like, well, these journalists and the president. And I was full of, stories. And he's like, gee, what is this? At that moment, the pilot walks up from the cockpit, walks straight to me and says, hey, how are you? How would you like to have lunch with us in the cockpit? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? And I get up, and as I walk through the aisle, my neighbor says, who are you? What kind of a famous person or whatever? And I had no idea. And I started asking myself, who am I that these things start happening? And I think it's a certain kind of energy when people realize that you're open to adventure and you're alert and aware and very present, and something special happens and that triggers other things to happen.
I agree with what you're saying there, but did you say you were 26 when this happened?
Yes.
Right? So at that point, of course, in every stage of our lives, we go through this point of wondering, who are we and who are we meant to be in this world? But you were living something extraordinary in those moments. So what was going to come next for you then?
Well, I must say, looking back, I think I wouldn't say I was a bit arrogant, but I was so sure that I could do this. I could follow my intuition. I was pushing it to the limits a little bit. And I learned not to do that anymore. But I was testing it. I was testing myself. I was testing the universe. And I was really living on the edge. And I kind of liked it.
That sounds great. So, in your early 20s, what else was going on in your life?
Well, I must say that I've always lived an unconventional life. So I've never worked for a boss or for an employer. I've always been self-employed. So I was used to looking for opportunities and being creative and arranging my own projects and completing them. And I was always traveling and then seeing opportunities to do things. Like I spent some time in Dutch Caribbean island, Curacao. And I noticed that all the car rentals, they had their brochures. There was no internet back then. So they had leaflets and brochures with their prices. And everybody had a cheap category and a little bit more expensive. And then, the most expensive one, but the prices were so different. So I decided to make an Excel sheet with all the different prices for the different car rentals. Mm-hmm. And then I sold them that Excel sheet with their own information and the information freely available to all the other car rentals, nobody had ever thought of putting all that information together. With the money I made, I bought this Caribbean ticket to travel for a month and follow my intuition.
That is fantastic. You have some foresight, you have some innovation, you like to see opportunity and then capitalize on it.
True. And, not being afraid to do something stupid like offer car rentals to buy their own information. They were actually happy buying it from me. Don't be afraid to try things or to fail, because I've also failed in a lot of things that I did, but it's not really failure. You learn from something. So there might be an evening that you're in a restaurant by yourself and you really want to connect with somebody and there's nobody there to connect with. And that moment you learn about yourself, that you're not always strong and invincible, but that you're also human and feel insecure sometimes, or alone, or tired, or whatever. So there's no real failure, not in entrepreneurship and not in traveling. They're all learning moments. And if you consider them like that, then there's really no risk and no downside.
Absolutely. I think it's fantastic to go in with that attitude of success or learn rather than success or fail.
True. Yeah, that's true. And it's a life skill that you may learn during traveling and that you can apply into any other area of life.
So what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned through your trips, aside from trusting your intuition, because clearly that has steered you well? What else?
Also, that there are a lot of people in the world who are really good and who mean well. And of course, there are a few who don't mean well or who are in a difficult position and they see a foreigner who in their eyes is rich and they might want to take advantage of you, and you can be in the world focusing on those bad people or people in bad situations, and then you miss a lot of opportunities to connect with the good people. Or you can focus on the good people and then risk being disappointed sometimes. I always choose the last option. So I focus on the good people, I trust people, and then unfortunately sometimes you get disappointed. But I meet a lot of people who are only thinking about protecting their luggage and double locking their rooms and not doing anything unusual to avoid being disappointed, basically. But they miss so many opportunities to connect and to go on adventures and to explore. Because any growth and anything creative and anything exceptional happens outside of your comfort zone.
Well, and that's one of the things that I find most challenging when I talk to people about creating their travel experience is so many, I will say especially Americans, it may be other nationalities as well, but so many Americans feel like they want to have all the creature comforts that they would have at home and bring everything with them that they might possibly need so that it's just like at home. And the whole point of travel is that it's not supposed to be just like at home. And the less of home you take with you, the more you'll be able to immerse in wherever you are.
True, you're completely right. And even if you don't bring your shampoo or toothbrush, you can buy it anywhere and it will look and taste different. But that's also part of the adventure. And I think you can stay at home, not travel, and have an open mind, and you'll be on adventures and you'll learn things and meet people and be very alert and aware. Or you can travel with a closed mind in a different location, but you're still not open for all the things offered to you. And when you really want to travel, you better travel with an open mind to fully absorb, everything that's available for you, all the inspiration, all the experiences. And I think you can only do that for a certain time. And then looking at myself, I need time to process, to recover, and I want to be alone. So when I was younger and I didn't have so much money, I stayed in hostels, in dorm rooms, and you're always surrounded by people. And now I prefer to rent an Airbnb room and have a private room to be able to withdraw if I want to. So when I'm out in the world, I'm open for inspiration and meeting people and adventures. And when I'm by myself, I want to process and be alone and recover and be ready again to go out again. And that's both when I'm in the Netherlands and when I'm traveling. It's just how I function. And I learned that by traveling and being among people too much. I learned that I also need this time by myself.
I agree completely. I think it makes a huge difference. If you don't take that time to process and it's just go, 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 I think you're missing out on some of the lessons learned through the reflection, not just the activity, but truly embracing the part of travel of what have I learned and what's different, and how can I take parts of that home with me? Because people have a hard time coming wherever home is for them after a trip if they haven't taken that time to do the processing.
I think that's great what you're saying. So it's not only the activity, it's also the processing, the combination, the reflection. And only reflecting, it doesn't give you any experiences. But if you only have experiences and activities and don't take the time to reflect and process, then you don't get the full value out of it. And I see so many people traveling nowadays, just piling up experience onto experience and activity onto activity. And they kind of get a travel burnout, no more, or they become party people or whatever. And I also see people who just do the reflection, and they don't take time to go out there and do any activities or experiences. So I think that's brilliant. You need the combination of both.
You do. And I hope that people, when they're listening to this, they recognize that solo travel doesn't have to mean that you're alone. And I think there's that misconception that's out there a lot. And what you've talked a lot about so far today has been really so many different ways of connecting with people that you may be more open to because you're traveling solo.
True. And I think traveling solo, like you say, is not about being alone, but it's about you making decisions. You deciding when you want to be alone, when you want to be with people, and how and who and where. And when you're traveling with somebody, you either have to discuss every time an opportunity arises or something happens, you have to discuss what you want to do, or you stick to the schedule that you've agreed beforehand, and then you miss out on a lot of things. And you're never alone, but I know a lot of people fear being alone, even in their homes, in their work, in their relationship. And I think it's really great to spend some time alone, or to spend a lot of time alone, to get to know yourself. It's good for your work, it's good for your relationships, it's good for your own personal development. And also traveling, it's great to have these reflection moments.
I agree completely. So we talked a lot about some of the travel that you did specifically when you were younger, but you're not 26 anymore. What is travel different for you, aside from taking that alone time for reflection? What are some other ways that travel's different for you now?
Oh, technology has changed a lot. Like now I use Uber and Airbnb and Google Maps, and life becomes so easy. You don't have to think about anything. To be honest, often I have no idea where I am, where I am in a country or in a city, because you use Google Maps and public transport and Uber and whatever. In one way, it becomes easier. In another way, it becomes more like at home, or like all the places start to look like each other. There's Starbucks everywhere, there's co-working spaces everywhere. So there's some advantages and some disadvantages, but it's definitely become easier.
I can really relate to what you're saying, though. And I've been having this conversation more and more, unfortunately, which is when I'm traveling for work-related things or for a conference to speak, in some ways, if I'm just traveling to a destination to take a taxi to the hotel room, speak at the conference, and head back, it almost doesn't matter what glamorous location that conference is in, because nobody sees it. And I'm finding more and more that these conferences could really leverage the cities that they're in, and they're not. Myself and my business, I'm looking at what kind of opportunity is there for that, because, these people are missing out. And just go to a conference to sit in a hotel, then you might as well just go anywhere. If you want
to be anywhere, right? Yeah,
Yep.
You know nothing about the country, about the people. And what I usually do is talk to the taxi driver or the Uber driver when I arrive. They can give you like information about, what's going on at the moment, a nice restaurant, something off the beaten track, whatever. And that's often the only contact you have. And also for journalists, I learned when journalists go to an area, the taxi driver is like their first point of contact. And that's often what they report. But talking about conferences, what I found out, I've spoken at a lot of conferences, I've organized a lot of conferences. And what I find is that not the speakers and the workshops and the topic is what people come to conferences for, but the coffee breaks. because the coffee breaks and the other breaks are when you talk to the other participants. So why don't conferences organize like much more open programs where not only you can talk to the other participants, but also can get to know the city that you're in and maybe, network or meet local people working with the same topic at the conference for, or visiting co-working spaces or local hospitals, depending on the topic. I think that would be great to have more of a feeling of the country and the city, or instead of just any hotel and any conference place.
I agree completely. Actually, the last time I was at a conference in Denver, we purposely arrived early. I had looked ahead and found out that there was an amazing a cappella group playing at Red Rocks, which is one of the best venues in the world for people to hear a concert. And, it's on people's bucket list to travel to. And we were just going to be right there anyway. So we got tickets to Red Rocks, and I organized a walking tour for a small group of people so we could see the city before the conference even started, because otherwise you're going to get out. And it was a beautiful city during the monarch butterfly migration, which is abundant in Denver. Things that you'd never know were happening around you. And if you'd only been you'd have missed it all.
But what you did is you opened up to this possibility, and you opened up some time in your agenda by arriving a day early. And if you don't open up for opportunities, they won't present themselves. So you showed the mentality, I'm open for something new, for something special, for something local. And then you went ahead and found something. So I think it starts with your mentality. It doesn't start with, the world presenting you things on a silver plate.
I agree. And I think, if people would just understand that there is something worth going to see, whatever you have the most interest in, go try it in another place that you are exploring for the first time. And you have a whole different appreciation and perspective. I encourage people to be tourists in their own backyard, because they're not even aware of some of the amazing things that their own areas have to offer. And gosh, how can they be travelers without that?
I completely agree with you. And maybe this is something interesting for the listeners who are still a little bit reluctant to go on a solo trip. Why don't you go on a solo trip half a day or a few hours in your own environment? So take a different route to your work, go to a different coffee shop, force yourself to talk to a stranger or to walk around aimlessly in a neighborhood you don't know and feel like a tourist open for adventures and see what happens in your own backyard, as you say.
I agree. And that's a great way to test some of what you might fear or any insecurities, safety concerns. You're close enough to home. You can do it within a drive away. And yet you could still just pretend I'm going to go do this entirely different experience. And it's more of a mindset thing than it is about the destination.
True. You can go on little adventures in your own environment and discover new things about yourself. So if you're a little bit reluctant, don't, go on a big solo trip on the other side of the world, but start small and start close by and try to develop that mentality and discover if you are the kind of person who is open to mini adventures.
Well, it's neat because I've heard of people who say, I'm going to pack up and I'm going to go, my first overseas experience is going to be in Paris, which I think is fantastic. Paris is a stunning city. But if you've never ridden public transportation in the language that you're familiar with and you don't speak French, what makes you think that's really the best idea to go that doesn't really primarily post things in English?
Well, that's a real adventure, but I see what you mean. Maybe it's good to practice public transport then in your own country, in your own language. But I think it's great if people, decide to go on an adventure and then just plunge in and experience everything. And nowadays with Google Translate and whatever, you can get quite far. But it also depends on your expectations. If you think you're going to be very efficient the first time using Paris public transport, then you might be disappointed. But if you think it's an adventure, and even if it takes me all day to get somewhere, it's part of the adventure, then you're going to have a good experience.
Again, it goes back to the mindset. And I love that you continue. I feel like we're just kind of tag teaming back and forth because we're sending the same message. And I love that.
Me too, because it's brought me so much. And I know a lot of other people who experience the same things. And I also know a lot of people who want to or who should experience this because they have never felt that kick that you can get or that energy rush when things happen, unexpected things that are, beyond imagination, meeting special people, having special experiences. And that's worth, the risk that you take or getting out of your comfort zone, which doesn't always feel good, but the rewards are definitely worth it.
So what do you think is really holding people back from taking the plunge and trying solo travel for the first time?
Well, stepping out of your comfort zone always gives you an uncomfortable feeling. So if you're not used to that, it might hold you back. And when you overcome that feeling of stepping out of your comfort zone, then there's always your environment who's trying to hold you back. And they will make sure you think about the risks and, why don't you just do what we always did? Why don't you just do what we all do? So the key is to surround yourself with people who have the same dreams and plans that you have. So don't talk to your environment who doesn't want to go solo traveling about solo travel, but talk to other people who have traveled solo, and you'll get inspiration and tips, and you'll feel supported instead of being held back. So first you have to deal with yourself and your own fears and insecurities, but then you have to deal with those same things in your environment. And if you don't surround yourself with like-minded people, your environment might hold you back and might pull you back into that comfort zone that you just managed to step out of.
I love it. I think you've said it very well. Esther, let's make sure that people know where to find you so they can continue to follow you and stay on top of whatever you have coming up next.
Well, it's very easy. I have a website, estherjacobs.info, and I post a lot of blogs. There's a travel blog on there with travel stories from all over the world. And also on social media, I'm very active. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. So wherever you type in Esther Jacobs or sometimes Esther Jacobs NL for the Netherlands, you'll find me. You can follow me with pictures or with quotes or videos or however you like. I also wrote a few books. They're also on my website. If anybody wants to contact me, please do. I love to share my stories. I love to help other people taking those steps out of their comfort zone and also be more visible in doing that. So using social media to share your adventures, your lessons, your message you might have. So please look me up and connect and contact me if you have any questions or ideas you would like to share.
Esther, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspectives and adventures in solo travel with us today.
Great. I always love sharing these stories because I relive the experiences again. And I really like your take on this and your goal to motivate people to travel solo because it brings so much, and I hope we can inspire more people to take this step and to plunge themselves into this big adventure.
Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Esther shared with us today? It's important to remember that sometimes the more we plan and structure our experiences and layer them back to back to back to cram them all in, the less time we're taking for reflection and the opportunity to determine what those experiences actually mean for us and how we can grow from them. Just some perspective to go forward with on your next trip. We've reached the end of another episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Don't forget to come over to Facebook at Transform Via Travel or find us on Twitter at Go Solo Live. And if you like what you've heard, don't forget to invite your friends to listen to Go Solo Live. If you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me directly at Jennifer@transformviatravel.com. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.